Good afternoon again. Thank you so much for joining our monthly webinar. In case you haven't heard, the big news this year for us is that we are now offering MCLE credit for California attorneys and CE credit for workers' compensation claims adjusters. So all of these monthly webinars are for attorneys and adjusters. All attendees must be on the webinar, able to see the slide presentation, and attend for the entire hour to receive credit. Again, just to clarify, you must watch the presentation in order to receive credit. We unfortunately cannot provide credit if you call in only. Please do remember to visit our website at bradfordbarthel.com for tons of information about Bradford and Barthel and our value-added services. Just a couple of reminders on our value-added services. Do check out our training page if you're an adjuster. We have over 80 hours of CE credits available to you. So I know your credits are due coming up in June. So if you're short, you can find a ton of options on our website. And additionally, you can register for our upcoming webinars. Our May and June webinars are available for registration now. Our B&B blog, which is written by our B&B attorneys, releases an average of 2 new articles a week on current workers' compensation topics. So do check out our blog if you haven't already, or if it's been a little while for you. And finally, our AMA analysis and rating department, by the way, you're looking at everyone in our AMA analysis and rating department today. They fully analyze and annotate medical report shortcomings, outlining sections that either need to be bolstered or undercut, depending on your objectives. So I'm sure they're going to talk a little bit more about their department today as we move on. But this is really important. In your GoToWebinar panel, find the handout section. You're going to find 4 handouts that Tim has provided for you today. They include a copy of today's PowerPoint presentation, our 2005 electronic permanent disability rating schedule, our PD money chart cheat sheet, and our reserve estimate cheat sheet. So all of those are in the handout section. You can download those and use them whenever you'd like. So take advantage of that. We always encourage questions. I always joke that Tim loves questions, but he really does.
I really do.
You can submit them in the questions section of your GoToWebinar panel, and we will do our best to get those answered. But if we don't get your question answered, you can always email our rating department at ratings@bradfordbarthel.com. Tim Mussack is leading today's training on estimating permanent disability for reserving and PD advances. And as I mentioned, we have our rating department on with us, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Let's start with Susan.
Hi, everybody. I'm Susan Colias. I've been at Bradford and Barthel almost 12 years. Some of you may remember me from doing liens. I've been doing ratings now for about 4.5 years. I have a fun fact for you. We have this pure white scrub jay that comes and visits our bird feeder. He's been coming right about since COVID started, so about 3 years now. And he's called a leucistic scrub jay. He has color in his eyes, but none on his feathers.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Right. Well, thank you, Susan. Sorry, I don't have an interesting factoid like that. I wish I did. But yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kenny Tolbert, and I work in the ratings department with Susan and our man of the hour, Tim. I've been with Bradford and Barthel for about 2.5 years now. I think you're in for a good webinar today, as Tim has a lot of experience and keen insights on ratings. So I think you're in for some pretty interesting topics on estimating PD values. And so I'm glad to be here with you. So thank you. And I think I'll pass it off to Tim now.
I'm Tim Mussack. I'm in the Sacramento office of Bradford and Barthel. I've been with Bradford and Barthel in just about 15 years completed. As Kenny said, I've got a lot of practice with ratings. I've been doing this full time since 2005. Before that, I did the prior rating schedule. So I've been around a little bit doing that. And I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy that you're attending. Thank you. And before we get started, I asked Tammy to ask a couple of questions just to help me see where we're at with our audience, and I also get to sneak in a little bit of training in advance.
And so you're going to see our first poll on your screen now. You should already be able to answer it. How many ratings have you completed in the last 6 months? This is what Tim would like to know, is how many ratings you've completed. Is it 0, 1 to 2, 3 to 5, or more than 5? I'm going to give this a few seconds. How many ratings have you completed in the last 6 months? And I'm only going to give it a few more seconds here. If you missed the vote, don't worry. We're just trying to get an idea of where you're at.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm going to share
Looks like
these
we've got a pretty wide range here, some with no experience and some that have some more experience. I appreciate that, so thank you. If you have specific questions during our webinar relevant to the topic, feel free to send those in to us, but I'll try and cover through the range here. Next one, Tammy.
What is the impairment number for carpal tunnel? You've got 3 options there, or a none of the above. What is the impairment number for carpal tunnel? I'm going to give it a few seconds.
Okay.
Takes them a little bit longer on this question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to close it in 3, okay?
Okay.
And Tim, we really like, let me share these results. We really like a couple of options on this one.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You know what? Thank you. We had almost 60% of you replied, and I really appreciate that. The correct answer on that is the B, 16.01.02.02. This is nothing you have to memorize, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the rating schedule and that there is an order to it. These are not just random numbers. So picking out an impairment number is not a random act. There's an order to it, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So thank you.
Okay, and finally, our last question. What is the WPI range for lumbar spine DRE Category 3? What is the WPI range for lumbar spine DRE Category 3? 5 to 8%, 10 to 13, 15 to 18, or again, none of the above? What do you think? Take a guess if you don't know.
I am really appreciative. We've got almost 70% of you have responded. I'm really appreciative of this. This is helping me further clarify where we're at and what I should talk about or not talk about. So we can stop it there. The correct answer for DRE lumbar spine is 10 to 13%. About half of you voted for the 15 to 18. That's the range for the cervical spine. So that gives me another good point to make that for DRE category 3, 4, and 5, you got to make sure you're getting the right region of the spine in order to address WPI. And that is it for our rating questions, and we're going to get going right along now. We're talking about estimating permanent disability for reserving and PD advances. And what we need to do in order to estimate PD is we have to have a brief understanding of ratings and what the rating schedule looks like and how we use it. And I'm going to start by talking about the labor code that applies to rating in California. Labor code 4660, effective for 2005 dates of injury and some prior to that. We went to the AMA guides, which is a really big transition in California for rating workers' comp permanent disability. Labor code 4660.1 was some tweaks to that for dates of injury 1/1/2013 and later. So there's been no changes since then to our rating schedule. I'm going to assume that most of what we're seeing now is 2013 dates of injury or later. So I'm going to focus on that. But keep in mind, if you're dealing with older cases, it might be a slightly different rating process. So a couple of different, it's the same string, but a couple of different pieces that are different. So keep that in mind. 2013 and forward, everything's the same. Everything's multiplied by 1.4. Every WPI gets increased by 40% before we do occupation and age adjustment. So there was a statutory agreement that the AMA guides really isn't enough, and the agreement was we're going to increase it by 40%. prior to 2013, we were increasing WPI anywhere from 10 to 40%. 2013, everything's a 40% WPI increased. These are the things that you need to do ratings. You need to have a rating schedule available and a money chart in order to do the reserving. I'm going to look at those a little bit here if I can bring them up again without messing up. I'm going to start with the permanent disability rating schedule, but there's an introduction that actually does do that, give you instructions and introduction in there. And then there's next section is impairment numbers, and their numerical order. And the source for that numerical order is the chapter number of the AMA guides. So this page 2-1 of the rating schedule says categories 3 through 18. These are the chapters of the AMA guides from which impairment is taken, the different body parts, body systems from which impairment is taken. There's no WPI in chapters 1 or 2, but 3 through 17 cover the different body systems. Chapter 18, pain, there's a 3% WPI pain increase that's discussed in chapter 18, but we don't have an impairment number for that. We don't add pain to 0. We add it to a different body part. We're going to focus today on chapters 15, 16, and 17, the orthopedic chapters, because that ends up being the bulk of what we see in workers' comp in California and probably throughout the country. So we're going to look at chapters 15, 16, and 17, and the reason I wanted to point that out is because these are numerical order by chapter numbers. The impairment number, the first 2 digits of the impairment number, tells you the chapter number from which that came. So 15 is the spine, 16 is the upper extremities, 17 is the lower extremities. So that poll question earlier for carpal tunnel, if you know that it's in chapter 16 upper extremities, the only option there was 16. So 16.01.02.02. My point there is, if you get the right chapter, then your work is really easier, finding the right body part. So for example, with the spine, we've got a cervical, we've got a thoracic, and we got a lumbar spine region, the neck, mid back, and the low back. And they have different numbers for them. So those you want to look through. If you're doing ratings, and you're going to need to do ratings to do a WPI estimate for reserving, or even for settlement valuations before there's maybe before MMI or after MMI, whenever you're doing it. But you're going to need to get the right impairment number, and that's how you do it. Chapter 16 follows chapter 15, and then chapter 17, I would just point out that chapter 17, there are a whole bunch of options, and specifically once we get into the knees and the hips and the feet and the toes, there's a lot of different options. So get to the 17s and look your way through and see where you're going to get the impairment number. There's a 1.4 modifier section within the rating schedule. It takes the WPI times 40, increased by 40%, or you can use the FEC tables. This 8 FEC, which is what we had, the FEC value is what we had before 2013. This 8 was the 40% increase. So this column or this row across the bottom of 8 serves as the 40% increase as well. So either way you want to do it, you can do a calculator. You don't have to use this, but one thing to remember when we're rating in California permanent disability, we round to a whole number at every step. The next section I want to look at is the occupational group numbers. They're in alphabetical order with a 3-digit group number. If we go to the end of that section, we find that there's some helpful pieces of information in here. This, we're starting on page 3-27. It tells us what these digits mean. Each of those digits mean something. So we really want to try to get the right occupational group number, get a correct rating. We talked, Tammy mentioned earlier that our ratings department can help critique doctors' report. Our real goal is to give an accurate rating. That's what we always want to do. Everybody wants to do is get an accurate rating, and getting the right impairment number and the right occupational group number are steps towards that. It's a three-piece process for rating occupation. And it's just, you can just click through the different pieces of the rating schedule and it'll get you there. And the final is the occupational adjustment. And the final piece of a rating string is the age adjustment, age at date of injury. One thing you want to be familiar with if you're doing ratings is the combined values chart at the end in section 8 of the rating schedule. So be aware of that. And this is where we do the combining. When you're putting numbers together in work comp rating, you are either adding or combining. Most of the time you're combining. The primary exception is if you're doing range of motion for the same part of the body, range of motion impairment for the same part of the body, you would add those values. Most other times, if you have two values to put together, you're going to combine them. That includes, at the conclusion of your rating strings, if you have more than one body part for one injury, you're combining the permanent disability, and this is what's used for that. Once you get to the permanent disability, you got to find a money chart. Ours is no different than anybody else's, other than it has Bradford Barthel's name on it. But the money chart, there's a percent, there's an automatic number of weeks fixed to that PD percent, and then there's a dollar value. These dollar values are assuming maximum PD wage earners. Where we're at now in California, if somebody's working full-time, they're going to be a maximum PD wage earner, but a part-time employee might not be. So when you're doing reserving or valuing a case or starting to pay benefits, just pay attention to what the rate should be. These values are maximum PD rates, $290 a week for 2014 and 2014 and beyond. I'm just going to go through this real quick because we've got other stuff in here. Temporary disability rates over the years, COLA over the years, life expectancy table. If you are doing reserving on life expectancy values, the Office of Self-Insurance Plans established that we use the current U.S. Life table. The most current published U.S. Life table is this one, from 2020. So this is the life expectancy you use according to the Office of Self-Insurance Plans for reserving this year. Yes, I see. I have a question.
Yeah, we have a question from Megan, which I think is pretty interesting. I know the most recent rating schedule was issued in 2005. But is it updated at regular intervals to accommodate new industries and new occupations?
It has not been. Initially, it was agreed that it would be done at least every 5 years. It has not been. We've had one update for 2013 since the inception of this rating schedule in 2005. So thank you for the question.
Thank you.
And I'm going to add to that, because of that, it's important that to get the correct occupation, you know a little bit about the job duties, because job titles just don't do it, and they change. New job titles come up all the time. So knowing a little bit about the job duties and that section of the rating schedule that gives some instructions on getting the correct occupational group number, it becomes more valuable because it's harder and harder to get the right occupation for every injury that you have, every injured worker that you have, if they're not in there, that their title isn't in there in the rating schedule, or there may be a title that doesn't really present the same physical characteristics as the job for the injured worker that you're working with. So that's a good question on that. Life pension rates, these are maximum life pension rates for these years and these percents. And again, these are based on maximum earnings, which is a different maximum than for PD, and who knows why, but it's different. So any benefit that you're paying, you want to double check what the maximums are for that benefit, because it might change. Again, these are maximums. This gives you the formula for calculating if you have less than maximum, but they're all different. There's mileage rates, those are changing from year to year because of the increase in gas. Okay, so we're going to keep back in here now. So Labor Code 4660, nature of the physical injury or disfigurement. and 4660.1 comes from the AMA guides, that big green book. And if you're doing ratings, you're going to want to become somewhat familiar with parts of that AMA guides. And this green book, it's a 5th edition. That's what we use in California. The 6th edition is out. We're not using it in California. Some states are. I understand the 7th edition is being worked on, but California, we're still on the 5th edition, and we may stay there for a while. So when you're estimating permanent disability or even rating permanent disability, we need to rely on medical information. That's what the AMA guides is all about, medical information that's going to steer us towards the right body part evaluation and the right WPI. The good thing about the rating schedule is it was created after we knew we were going to the AMA guide, so most of the time you can find an impairment that will fit that particular injury. It was created to fit that, so most of the time you'll see that. But the AMA guides discusses WPI and offers methodologies to evaluate WPI based on the documentation in the medical report. So the doctors really have the task of documenting what they're finding, and that can help any interested observer, any knowledgeable observer, review the doctor's report and come to a similar conclusion for WPI when reviewing the AMA guide. That's what the AMA guide's philosophy is, that there's going to be some consistency and reproducibility. So it's incumbent upon the doctors to document enough so that we can see what they're dealing with and what they're using to evaluate. And if they're not MMI yet and the doctor hasn't given us MMI, we can probably come up with some estimates on our own. That's the beauty of it. So I'm talking about estimating and rating, and we're going to focus on pre-MMI. So we're going to estimate permanent disability by first estimating WPI. After WPI is estimated or after it's determined by the doctor in the MMI report, we still need to rate it. So if you're estimating for reserving or for settlement valuations or paying, you still need to rate it. It needs to go through that rating string. It has to have that 1.4 adjustment, so a 40% increase to the WPI for every single rating string. And it has to have the occupational adjustment and the age adjustment. I'm going to say it again for the age adjustment. It's age at date of injury. That sometimes gets a little mixed up. It's age at time of injury, not age at the time you're rating it, which might seem logical, but it's age at time of injury. And you're going to have to know a little bit about when and how to combine or start learning how to do that. And eventually, you're going to need to understand about apportionment, because the employer is only to pay for the permanent disability that injury caused. I'm going to look through a rating string. We've got some people that are less experienced with rating. So I'm going to go through a rating string just so you see what it looks like and know what we're talking about, what the elements are in terms of developing a permanent disability valuation, whether it's an estimate or an actual rating based on the doctor's reporting. So here's an example of, we're looking at a 2017 date of injury. I didn't give the date of birth, but you want to know that so you can calculate the age on date of injury yourself. I skipped that part here, said it's a 39-year-old electrician. The doctor tells us, or we already knew, but the doctor tells us that he or she is evaluating a lumbar spine injury, and the doctor gives 10% WPI using the DRE method for the lumbar spine. That's from category 3, DRE category 3 for the lumbar spine region. So this is what a rating string looks like. And this is what you're going to need in order to do an estimating, or not just estimating, but if you have the MMI report and you're doing your evaluation of the report. Starts with the rating string, and these digits, again, they all mean something. The 15 is chapter 15, the spine. The .03 tells us it's the lumbar spine. The 0.01 in this case tells us it's the DRE method. There's two options for the spine, but the DRE is supposed to cover most of them. And 00 would be for subcategories of which there are none for the DRE method. That next piece here, that's 10, is the WPI that we get from the report, whether the doctor gives us from MMI or you're estimating based on your understanding of the medical information and the medical records to date. We do the 1.4 multiplying or increasing the 10 by 40%, we get 14. This is the 3-step occupational adjustment. The occupational group number for electrician is 380. It matches the occupation with the injured body part and gives us a letter variant. That's the term for this. And C through J now are the variants. F being right in the middle, meaning kind of average. If the variant is above F, it's going to increase the rating. If it's below F, it'll likely decrease it. And so what this does is this H here suggests that electricians have a greater than average need for their lumbar spine, so it's going to go up some more. And so that's what we get is the 18%. This is the 14 with the H getting us to 18. A 39-year-old falls in that 5-year range for which there is no increase. 37 to 41, there's no increase. Older than that, we're looking at going up. Younger than that, we're looking at it going down, the age of date of injury, and the smaller the number, the less change or maybe no change, but the higher the number, the more likely it will change. If you're still new at ratings and you want a referral piece, this is in the rating schedule, this rating formula. It's on page 1-10, and it walks you through the different pieces of the rating strength. So this is a good thing to get to know and review if you're new at ratings and you're going to be doing ratings, you're going to be doing estimatings. So in terms of the WPI and doing the ratings, you need the medical information. We're going to look at, again, the most frequent injuries are for the spine, the arms, and the legs. As you're doing ratings, as you're doing workers' comp, you're going to become more familiar with medical information and anatomy, and that's something that you want to do, and that's going to make you better and better at what you're doing if you understand that. So many times doctors are writing things that might be new to you. Stuff was all new to me one time too. Look stuff up. We do all the time. Doctors don't always explain it well, as they just don't have the room or the time to do it. So if there's something that the doctor is talking about that you don't understand, look it up. It's an easy thing to do, and it helps you understand, and you'll keep some of that knowledge for next time. But things you're going to need to learn, and you will learn, are bone structure. You're going to learn about muscles, ligaments, tendons. You're going to learn about the nervous system throughout the body. And the sources that you get for learning that information. The AMA Guides actually is a pretty good instructional piece. They really do discuss different impairments, different body functions, different injuries, and mechanics pretty well in some instances within the AMA Guides. You can read the introduction to the relevant chapters, the applicable sections. They really do try to explain what they're talking about. It's still somewhat technical, but they do try to explain it. The applicable tables and figures give you some more understanding, can help give you more understanding of what the medical condition is and how to interpret medical information. And then the examples in the AMA Guides really do sometimes add clarity and additional instruction and guidance on how to use the AMA Guides and how to evaluate WPI. Some of them are really helpful. In some instances, some specific issues are not really discussed in the narrative, but are explained in an example or two. So those examples are helpful to read. It's a good thing to read those. Doctor's reports. from doctors' reports. Sometimes doctors will explain what they're talking about. Some doctors will include research and other different things that they've accumulated over the years in their experience, and we'll send those to you. But many times they're going to talk about in that report some of what they're evaluating. But there's a common format for the reporting and for workers' comp specifically, and the AMA guides and the California Code of Regulations both give very similar instructions to the doctors for the format. But so they should be giving us the information that's going to be helpful to understanding. It's designed to help us in workers' comp, the California Code of Regulations is. And if the doctor is following the format and giving us that insert, I'm seeing a question there. How about that? Will Tim talk about kite analysis? Very briefly at the end, I will talk about kite analysis. The internet, I think it's good to have the internet available and to research information on the internet. When I started, there wasn't an internet, and learning was a little more challenging, but the internet is good. I would caution you when you're researching information that there are usually different medical opinions about everything. I've found that there is nothing for which there's 100% agreement among the medical community. So you kind of got to figure where you want to go for what you consider as objective. For me, I've decided that I'm going to use the National Institute of Health most of the time because I figure their role is to be objective. So that's what I use, but my caution is you can find a different opinion about everything on the internet, a different medical opinion about everything. So just pay attention to what you're looking for. We look at chapter 15. I'm going to look specifically at a couple of these three chapters, and I got to make sure I'm not running too late here. For the spine, the AMA Guides talks about a motion segment, and the motion segment is two vertebrae, the disc in between, and all the tendons and stuff beyond that. So that's what a motion segment is. So they define that, and there's different discussions about what motion segments are and how to evaluate them. But I wanted to show you this. This is a lumbar spine, but this is something that if you're doing work comp for a while, you're going to become familiar with is the structure of the spine, because it's relevant to understanding what the injuries are that happen. These are discs in between, and what happens frequently is these discs get displaced or ruptured or bulging out, and that can be an issue because there are nerves coming out at each space, and if that disc ends up pressuring a nerve, now we've got a problem. A disc causing issues, causing dysfunction by pressing on a nerve is radiculopathy. So that's something you'll see. Sometimes that disc can heal itself with the help of physical therapy or other conservative means. Sometimes it takes surgery. And what a discectomy is a doctor going in here and working on that disc and getting it so it's all back in place and it's not pressing on the nerve. A fusion is another thing you're going to want to know about as you go along. A fusion is a surgery that includes insertion of hardware that reduces the motion between two adjacent vertebrae. And I'm mentioning these specifically, a discectomy and a fusion, because those are rateable surgeries. If that surgery happens, there's going to be permanent disability. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's an automatic permanent disability. Chapter 16, frequently we see peripheral nervous system injuries, and those are things to pay attention to as well. There can be sensory and or motor function deficits as a result. While I'm saying this, it just popped in my head. We want to make sure we're evaluating what the condition is going to be at MMI and not what it was pre-treatment. Sometimes things recover or get better quite a bit, but there are some automatic PDs that we want to make sure we're looking at. As you're going along in your career, you're going to learn more about the peripheral nervous system, the upper extremities, that injuries frequently happen. You're going to learn more about the bone structure, including the wrists, all the bones here in the wrist and hand. You're going to learn more about the knee joints and things like that. And reason you want to learn about that is because there's some automatic PD for some of these issues. So the medical reports, the common format, we should be seeing a history of injury from the doctor. We should hopefully see some past medical and injury history as well. You may not see it in every report from a PTP, but for the medical legal reports, we should be able to expect the doctor to go through with the injured worker the past medical and injury history, including the initial exam and the final one if there's more than one exam from a QME or an AME. We should get that in both of them. Current complaints are going to tell us something all along the way from a PTP or a QME. Work history will sometimes tell you something, whether the person is been able to return to work or not. That sometimes tells you something about the significance of the injury. And the doctors will regularly review records. And when they're reviewing records, it's really helpful if we get a review of the treatment that's related to the injury and maybe prior conditions. The clinical findings, and by clinical findings, I'm talking about examination documentation, the current documentation, and review of diagnostic studies. So clinical objective findings, things that we want to look for. Doctors are going to give us diagnoses and their impression. MMI or not, we need to know that. We're not at a PD state yet if they're not MMI, although we still may need to anticipate and calculate a projected PD for reserving. Causation and apportionment, those are things to pay attention to along with future needs. Okay, so the whole person impairment 4661. So here I'm going through I'm going to go through the AMA guides a little bit, 15, 16, 17. It's a big book and there's a lot in there. That's what this slide says. It's a big book and there's a lot there. But when you're actually starting to use the AMA guides and the doctors are using the AMA guides to report on impairment, a couple of things to remember is we rate only whole person impairment. That's the whole person impairment. But the AMA guides has other values in there to help the doctors be more precise in some of the evaluation processes. So for example, an arm is 100% of an arm is worth 60% whole person. So most of the tables and figures in chapter 16 covering the upper extremities give upper extremity impairment values. Those need to be converted to whole person in order to rate it, because we don't rate the upper extremity value, we rate the whole person value. Digits have different values as well, so that's something to keep in mind because that all has to be converted. It's a pretty complex process in the AMA guides in chapter 16 if there's more than one digit injured and or more than one methodology for it or more than one joint of the digits. It becomes pretty complex and a lot of working pieces in there and conversions and calculations and combining and adding. Nothing that we're going to talk about how to do it today, but to be aware of. We only rate whole person. For a leg, for a lower extremity, 100% of a lower extremity is 40% whole person impairment. So again, the doctors can be more precise using those tables and figures in the AMA guides, but ultimately we want to make sure we're rating WPI. We're not rating any other. There's instructions in the rating schedule. I referenced page 111 for combining extremity impairments. You have more than one method for the same part of the body, and how to combine permanent disability when you have more than one rating string in the same injury. So if you're dealing with those sorts of injuries, multiple body parts being injured and rated. You review page 111 of the rating schedule for that. Reserving. I'm going to the California Code of Regulations 15300B, estimated future liabilities. You got to reserve every year for self-insured employers. You have to file annual reports that offer estimated future liabilities. And the way the California Code of Regulations, what that says, it's got to represent the probable future cost of compensation. So what is probable total future cost of compensation? We don't know. We don't know, but we're going to try to get as close as we can. It's what we got to do with and claims. We got to try to get as close as we can. So we got to review the doctor's reports, and we got to pay special attention to what the types of injuries and what's been found out. In particular, do we have surgeries? In particular, do we have fractures? In particular, do we have nerve injuries or spinal disc injuries? Those are things that we really want to pay attention to, whether it's a WPI report or not. We really want to pay attention to those because those are going to require more significant medical treatment, and those are more probable to have impairment. Okay, I have another question coming in, I think.
Yes, the question is, we received a PTP report that said return to pre-injury status and follow-up PRN. Does this mean that there is no PD and no future medical?
Probably, but if you're in doubt, you should clarify that with a PTP.
All right, thank you.
So if you're estimating PD, you really want to pay attention to these things. Return to work, it's not necessarily a medical piece, but it's a symptom of the medical piece. If the person didn't return to work, well, that's suggesting there's probably a less than complete recovery, because often people go back to work. Whether it's a PTP or not, whether there's litigation or not, those are all factors in terms of estimating permanent disability. That's how it works. So we got to pay attention to those things. And there are some specific estimates in terms of different body parts that can help you, guide you before MMI, and can help you double check MMI when the doctor does give impairment on that. An example would be the poll question we gave about the DRE category 3 for the lumbar spine. But it's easy enough to be at the wrong table and find the wrong value. DRE category 3 for the cervical spine is a 15 to 18. For the lumbar spine, it's 10 to 13. So you want to make sure you're getting to the right table, and it's okay to check and see if the doctor got to the right table. Particularly when we're looking at PTPs, there's new PTPs come in. They don't always have any formal training on how to use the AMA guides, and they're working through the best they can, looking at the AMA guides and trying to figure it out. And it's easy to make mistakes. It's a big book. It's easy to make mistakes. It's easy for us to make mistakes. So, but we're going to go through some of this stuff for the spine. And there's automatic PD for a surgery, for a discectomy or laminectomy, anything that's involving the disc. There's an automatic WPI. It's automatic DRE category 3 regardless of the region, and there's different values in each region. There's a different table for each region, and I think I have copies of that. A 2-level discectomy, well, that could be either DRE category 3 or potentially the range of motion method, whichever rate's higher. A 1-level fusion, that's an automatic permanent disability. That's an automatic, these are the low-end values from DRE category 4. A fusion is an automatic DRE category 4 for whichever region. So you've got automatic PD. You don't need to wait for an MMI report. You can rate that and reserve for that right now until you know exactly what the doctor is going to give it. There's more than probable, there's guaranteed permanent disability based on that. A 2-level fusion, again, the range of motion method would apply. These are just estimates here. the range of motion method estimating, I don't remember what the level of, some loss of motion, but no sensory or motor deficits. An individual is entitled to whichever rate's higher, but if there's a 2-level surgery, they get whichever is higher. But a surgery itself is automatic guaranteed PD. This is DRE category, the DRE table for the lumbar spine, table 15.3, and the values are across the top. And they're different values, although the narrative is all very similar for the thoracic and the cervical spine. Yes.
Yes, we have a question from Courtney. It's if the claimant is given 40% PD, can we advance 20% and then pay the remaining until the stipulation is approved?
You're asking me legal questions. To the best of my understanding, if the person has returned to work with an appropriate qualifying job offer, you don't need to pay any PD legally until there's a settlement of it. If they have not received a qualifying job offer, then you've got to pay what is reasonably owed. You don't get a stop, and PD accrues at the end of or at the end of TTD or MMI. So whenever you start paying, you got to go back to that date and pay that value. So if you know there's 40% PD, you have to pay a reasonable amount of that. And what might be reasonable is to, if there's an attorney, is to hold off paying the full amount until you've got attorney fees figured. But no, you can't just stop. You can't do that. Thank you, though.
Thank you. Thanks.
So here's an example using the spine. And what would you do if there's a lumbar fusion performed? Well, you know you got an automatic 20 to 23% PD, so you got to rate it out. Take that 20. I use 20. It's okay to be conservative, but a probable exposure. Everybody's getting pressure to reserve high, reserve low. You want to reserve what's probable. So I think 20 is a realistic estimate, the low end of that DRE category 4. And you're adjusted for the occupation and the age for that injured worker. And if that fusion, you're guaranteed, if that person's a max PD earner, you're guaranteed to owe $50,170 on that. Again, if there's attorney fees that you got to pay attention to, maybe you're not going to pay all the way to the whole 173 weeks, but you've got to start paying benefits from end of TTD or MMI date, whichever is earlier, unless there's a qualified job offer and that injured worker has. So this is an example of not MMI, had the fusion yesterday, or it's going to be tomorrow. You know you're going to have 20% PD. You know you're going to have $50,000 worth of PD on this particular case. Chapter 16, the upper extremities. Reminder, we only rate whole person impairment. So if you're getting upper extremity values, you want to make sure you're getting whole person impairment. And what we see frequently is carpal tunnel. You want to make sure you're getting the right impairment number. Cubital tunnel, or the ulnar nerve, has a different impairment number, and for some occupational group numbers that might change the rating. So you want to get the right one. I'm going to talk a little bit about amputation values, only because, not that we see amputations, but this gives you the idea of the full value of a part of the arm. For example, here's a thumb down at an amputation down at the CMC joint. We're looking at it being a 23% whole person impairment maximum for that. So that gives you an idea. And if we're not going to see an amputation probably, but that gives you an idea of the high end, the ceiling, and you can kind of sort of give yourself some basis from there. I'm not suggesting you assume an amputation or take that value, but just understand what the full value is. And here we go down to a finger. a ring or little finger here at the joint. We're looking at the ring or little finger, 5% WPI is the maximum on that. So those can give you some assessments as to what the value might be at different body parts. Nerve injuries, carpal tunnel here in the middle, that's the median nerve. These are maximum upper extremity values. Most frequently, we see just sensory deficit with a maximum 39% UE, and the doctor will assess how much is what the deficit is, and that gets applied to that. But so if there's carpal tunnel, you want to start thinking about maybe there's PD. There's not guaranteed PD for carpal tunnel, but if there's a surgery, there most probably will be permanent disability. Again, every individual results might differ, and the doctor's assessment of that individual might differ, but there's probably you need to think about whether there's PD, and things that can help you understand are whether the person returned to work. That generally indicates a good recovery, and things like that. Here's our WPI estimator, and these are just estimates, conservative estimates based on different parts of the upper extremity, and we're looking at some amputation values. You're not going to see a lot of amputations, I hope, but this gives you maximum values. And you can also see we've got some loss of motion estimates. If there's surgery on a shoulder or an elbow or a wrist, you're probably going to have some loss of motion. And depending on how significant the surgery and how quick and the recovery seems to be, and efficient the recovery seems to be by that injured worker, you may estimate 10 or 20 or 50% loss of motion and go with that. Peripheral neuropathy, again, it's showing that there's different impairment numbers. Carpal tunnel has its own. Carpal tunnel also, I've mentioned, it's not guaranteed, but it's probable. And a good conservative estimate might be, from page 495 of the guides, a 3% WPI, and don't forget to rate it. If you have bilateral and you're estimating 3% WPI for each one, bilateral carpal tunnel surgeries, don't forget to combine the PD. It's both of them going to that. The PD and the total value for both body parts. I'm going to quickly get into the lower extremities, chapter 17. I keep looking over here at my clock because I know I'm running late. Mentioned it a couple of times, but you want to keep it in mind. Lower extremity values are in chapter 17 of the guides for a more precise evaluation, but we want to make sure we're only rating whole person for the lower extremity. The common methods for evaluation are loss of motion, arthritis, and the DBE, which is table 1733, diagnosis-based estimates. And from that table, there's some automatic WPI. A meniscectomy, there's an automatic WPI, and there's some different valuations depending on what the meniscectomy is. So a report of a meniscectomy is incomplete. We need to know what it was. There's a partial, there's a lateral, there's a total, or a partial or a total, there's a lateral or medial, or it might be both. So we need to know what the surgery really was, which meniscus were involved, and whether it was a partial or total. A total knee replacement and a total hip replacement are automatic permanent disability. You may have apportionment that is or is not automatic, but the permanent disability is automatic. The minimum is 15% WPI. When you are doing your evaluation for the lower extremities, something to remember, table 17.2 is a nice guide that tells you that some methods can be combined and others cannot. They stand alone. They're kind of duplicating their evaluation of the same functional loss. The two that come up that can be combined most frequently are something from that DBE table and arthritis. Those seem to come up pretty frequently. Range of motion method, I'm going to skip right through that. There's an arthritis table, and if the doctor's talking about arthritis, maybe you can give a conservative estimate until you have more specifics. But if the doctor has given you measures, x-ray measures of arthritis, even if the person is not an MMI, you can go to table 1731 and come up with a WPI value. This is the table 1733, and it's 2 pages. The diagnosis-based estimates for the lower extremities as differentiated from the DRE for the spine, but there's some automatics. We've got meniscectomies, there's automatics, there's hip replacement, there's an automatic minimum of 15%, knee replacement, automatic minimum of 15%. And so here we have a part of that WPI estimate that we looked at very briefly at the beginning, has some of those in there. So that WPI estimate attachment that you got can be a helpful thing in terms of offering estimates of WPI, because you're going to have WPI, some automatic ones, and you want to look at it. Just as a reminder, you want to make sure that you're doing the full rating schedule. You want to include the 1.4 modifier, the occupation adjustment, and the age adjustment, and then you get your total dollar value. I'm going to take just a moment here, as I think one more piece I want to get to, because I know I am running out of time. I am going to go here to, looks like slide 57. So let me see if I can get there. Kite, I said I would talk about that briefly. I'm going to talk about that briefly. There are panel decisions that allow adding versus combining, and there are also panel decisions that disallow that. There is no binding case law that says you have to, but it's basically an extension of Alvarez-Guzman, that if a doctor offers evidence and reasoning that can substantiate the deviation from the AMA guides and the rating schedule, a statutorily presumed correct method of combining, then it has been allowed. But I would just reinforce it's not automatic. Every appellate decision that I've seen regarding Alvarez-Guzman or adding or anything else is the statutory method is presumed correct. It's got to be proven otherwise. So again, it's not automatic, and there's no binding case law that says kite applies in this instance or that instance or the other instance. But I do want to look at this one here, estimates of permanent disability, and this is from the California Code of Regulations, shall not be reduced based on apportionment unless the claim file includes documentation supporting apportionment. So knowing about that prior history can help understand whether or not you're going to have apportionment, but the documentation, the best documentation you can get supporting apportionment is prior awards using the AMA guides. Those are automatic apportionment. So my encouragement would be always look for prior awards, ask about them. I see that my time is up, so I'm just going to go through this in terms of estimating PD and paying it. Pay a reasonable amount. Use common sense and have a reason for what you do when you're paying permanent disability. If you have a reason for what you do, it's a reasonable amount is my philosophy. But if you don't have a reason, it's not a reasonable amount. So keep that in mind when you're dealing with reserving and paying benefits. That's what you want to do. So here's what I referenced regarding PD and its due. And that's what I have to say today about estimating PD. The medical information is there. Some of it's really complex. You just need to be persistent about trying to learn more and more as you go along.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you. And thank you all for joining us today. We know you're busy. We appreciate you spending an hour with us. I have a few very, very quick things to say, and then I'm going to let you go. I promise certificates for CE and MCLE will be emailed this afternoon. I will include a copy of the PowerPoint because I have a lot of you asking me about the PowerPoint. So I'll be sure to include a copy of the PowerPoint with the certificate so that you have a copy of that. The PowerPoint can also always be found on our external website under training and that day's event. Okay, so today's event under training, you can also find the PowerPoint there for today's webinar and any previous webinars. And finally, our next webinar is May 24th at noon on civil processes under the workers' compensation umbrella, 132A discrimination and S&W. So don't miss that one. You can register for it now. And thank you all again so very much. Oh, I'm sorry, one more thing. Some of you, we did not get your questions answered. I apologize. We kind of ran out of time. But do email our rating department if you have a question that you
Please
feel
do.
like you didn't get answered. Yeah, again, it's ratings. I think that's on our screen, right? Ratings, it's not there, but.
Yeah, it's ratings at bradfordbarthel.com.
Yeah.
This is me,
Thanks,
Tim
Tim.
Mussack at bradfordbarthel.com. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you so much. Have a great day,
Thanks
everybody.
for hanging in there with me. Thank you all.